Welcome to Good Service. We are your hosts, Ben Chung.
And Kevin's Huh?
Each week we'll be breaking bread and having real, raw, and vulnerable talks about life, faith, and everything in between, and always over a fire meal.
Thanks for joining our table today. Let's eat.
Folks, welcome back to another episode of Good Service. We are your hosts, Ben.
And Kevin.
And we have an incredible guest in the pod. We have singer, songwriter, worship leader, pastor. You may recognize him as a contestant on the hit show Alter Ego on Fox. We got James Paek in the pod.
Yo, I got so many questions.
Yeah.
So Kevin doesn't know who this guy is. So this is all genuine curiosity and surprise.
Yeah.
Dude, that show, I mean, I didn't really watch the show, but I saw an episode of it.
Wait, first, what is the show?
Yeah, so it's a singing show. It's so there was like a CG avatar.
Yeah. So you guys know like Masked Singer?
Yes.
Okay.
So Fox has like tons of iterations of the show. And so this was their first pilot season of doing the show called Alter Ego. So same concept, but instead of celebrities, they just use citizens. And instead of like on stage physical costumes, we were all puppeting avatars backstage.
What?
So we were
you wearing mocap suits?
Yeah, exactly. Full on mocap suits. We were in a sound studio that was next to the live studio, and we had monitors all over us so we can see what our characters were doing.
Wow.
And line of sight with the judges. So like my first conversation with will.i.am and Alanis Morissette was through an avatar.
What? That is so interesting.
And so the show was actually really cool, like because the concept of it was we're living in a new world where like the social constructs of what a star is supposed to look like don't need to stand anymore.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there's some God in that, you know, like this idea of sometimes we feel like we got to fit into these constructs that the world makes, but like God invites us to be exactly who we're meant to be and just get closer. And so we kind of got to create our characters and be free and like play and stuff. And so you get revealed when you get eliminated. And so everyone's kind of judging you based off of your character and your performance. But yeah, really, really fun experience.
How far did you get on the show?
Right before semi-finalists. So like quarterfinalists.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I saw the episode where I guess you got eliminated when you revealed your identity.
Yeah.
And you said something very powerful, that you were saying that, you know, you grew up in an era where, you know, obviously you're a fan of music, grew up in like 80s, 90s, right?
Yeah.
And that there wasn't anybody who looked like you, that you were, that was kind of out there. And so basically you're talking about representation, and I mean, the judges gave you a standing O after you said that.
Yeah, which is cool.
Can you talk a little bit about that, like what that meant for you, for that opportunity to be on a stage like that in front of these, you know, judges, these artists that you've admired, you know, as a child growing up, and then having the opportunity to sing in front of them, and then be able to even share that, because I mean, that was huge, bro. That was huge.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I had just left a church situation that I was at for about 5 years in Chicagoland. It's a pretty formative church, and I was the worship pastor there. And it imploded. So we could talk about that if we want to later, but it went through a bunch of chaos because the founding pastor, there was a group of brave women who came forward about sexual misconduct experiences. And so I was kind of helping a church go through this really crazy time of transition, super public. And I left, and I did not know what I was gonna walk into, to be honest. So I left, I can't be here anymore. I'm really tired. I served the best that I could, but I got a call from the show. Like totally random. I got an email, and I thought it was like fake, you know, like
how did they find you?
Yeah, how did they find you?
Well, I think, I know, like, I don't know, you know, like I did The Voice a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Where like I made it to the round where you can like sing for the judges, but I didn't get a chair turn. So I think sometimes like if you're in a show in the past, like people will like reach out. And then I have some like social media presence where like I have like, you know, videos that have me singing and stuff like that. So I think people kind of find, so
social media
I got reached out to do this show, and didn't know what I was walking into. So I just thought, I'll just do it. And so why not? And so there was an audition. I made the audition, made the show, which was really rad. And none of us really knew what the show was going to be about. But I think what God was doing for me was like putting me in a completely different context than I was in, right? So I was leading worship at a church. It was kind of going through chaos, and he's just like, I'm just going to put you on a TV show for a season. And it wasn't even about what it was going to do for me on the back end. Because honestly, the show did really cool stuff, but like what it did inside of me was even more powerful. And it was like this experience of like being with people that I would have never been with ever, from all different walks of life, building this TV show together, and just seeing that like God is everywhere. Amen. Like God is moving in spaces that we like to think that he's not here or he's not there, but like God is literally everywhere. And that was one of the learnings of like in this sound studio, in La Brea, like God is connecting people and like he's building new relationships where we can love one another. Wow. And I learned so much from my castmates and the producers and the crew. Like it was a special time, and I'm still really grateful because I think it was like this healing time for me. They got put me out of. And for me, like to your point, like the biggest thing that I wanted to show is like, I grew up with, I think like this God dream of like wanting to make music. But when I was a kid that was like making mixtapes on the radio, on my mixtapes, you'd be like Kiss FM, like on the beginning of the songs, they have their watermarks and stuff. I love music, man. That's dope. But nobody looked like me. And so I think when that happens, there's like this tacit communication going like, you don't belong here, you don't belong here, you don't belong here. And that's on church stages, that's on radio, that's everywhere, bro. Like you look at the music that we listen to as Christians, maybe in the church world, we're not there either. We're nowhere. And what that communicates to us is that you don't belong. By God's grace, I was leading worship on some of the biggest church platforms in America. But even then I was fighting this voice of like, you don't belong on this stage.
That's interesting.
Right? Because I'm just like, no one looks like me. Like legitimately, I'm the only Asian American on that stage. I can't tell you like how many DMs I got from like young Asian American worship leaders saying like, dude, it's crazy to see you on that stage. And when you realize though, it's like, hey, don't, like my response to them is like, hey, this stage is important and it's cool, but like don't diminish the stage that God's put you on. Amen. Because we live in this world where like, that's what success looks like. God uses that, but like, man, I was in a place that fell apart.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, God could be using the smallest things in this world to like be doing really cool stuff. And so, man, like I think to be able to say on stage, I felt like that was a God opportunity to say like, I want to show the world that like Asian Americans belong in the center of the conversation of creativity.
That's good.
Like we don't need to play support roles anymore. Like we don't need to be, bowing down to the man anymore. Like there's so much dignity that God's given us in our lived experience as Asian Americans that we need to start claiming and owning and holding. And in my own little way, God gave me that opportunity to say that in front of, these heroes of mine, will.i.am and Alanis Morissette are some of my favorite artists. And then to be able to say it to like a national audience, which was really cool. So meant the world, but I feel like more of what it did inside of me than kind of what it did for me on the outside.
Man, what a beautiful way to answer that question.
Yeah. Speaking of heroes, I think we got some hero sandwiches in front of us.
Okay.
What are we having today, Kev?
Today we're having Claro's Italian. It's one of they have a few locations, but this particular location is in SGV, which is a very dominant Asian American area. So thank you for having an amazing deli out there. Shout out. They have really funny sandwich names, so that's why I'm actually gonna pull out my phone real quick. So here are some of the sandwich names. Great Grandpa Joe, Grandpa Frank, Uncle George.
I feel like these are very personal names.
Yeah. It doesn't tell you
family.
anything about the sandwich. However, so basically we just got some pastrami here. We have literally just like prosciutto, which is crazy.
You got the full-on prosciutto
I've never seen that before.
Sandwich.
And we have some other ones, like basically there's like classic Italians. We got some honey turkey. We got some garlic salami. And we have some roast beef and things like that. So
There it is.
very excited to dig into these sandwiches.
Hey, cheers, guys.
Oh,
Cheers.
Sandwich cheers.
Sandwich
Yes.
cheers. All right, I'm gonna take my bite. This looks like a
As we
turkey.
bite into this,
Turkey plus.
I got a burning question in my brain that I had to ask James. And as he's chewing, I'm gonna let him chew a little bit. But I also wanted to, and later on, I have more fun questions that I want to get to. Like I want to hear him sing actually, if he's willing to do it. But
Oh
anyways,
snap!
oh, so this is our first time having a singer on the pod, right?
You are the first singer on the pod.
Hey, look at that,
Yeah.
dude.
Look at that. That's dope.
I'm honored.
Yes, more singers to come, but first singer.
Let's go.
And the question is, for those that are listening that are like just newer to faith, right?
Sure.
Like, what's a worship pastor? Like, what is that? No, seriously. And
Yeah.
what do you think it should be now as you're doing it?
It's a great question.
I know that's super loaded. but
Oh,
wanna
I know,
hear
it's
the
a good
answer,
question.
man. Yeah.
I think traditionally speaking, if you look at a job description, it often has to do with the music that happens at the top end of a church. So oftentimes, if you've never been to church, there's a program that happens as you gather, and usually it begins with something that we call worship. And so it's songs that we sing together as a liturgical practice to connect with God, one another, and with ourselves. And so there's all of the logistics that happen, right? Like creating a set list, rehearsals, recruiting bands, like recruiting vocalists, like training them, all that kind of stuff. And so kind of from a logistics standpoint, that's what a worship pastor does. I think my hope has been that in my understanding, our lives are a worship to the Lord. So whether we eat or drink, there's an invitation to do all those things for the glory of God. And so my hope as a worship leader is to understand that, and then to utilize these creative moments and these points in liturgy to be able to have people understand and express in a public setting together, like their love for the Lord, and then to teach them that hey, this is actually one aspect of worship, but how you live your lives. The decisions you make, the way that you take care of your kids, the way you do your homework, that is all a worship, right? Eating with friends, that's all worship, And so I use these small moments to be able to help folks understand that in their life. And then the other thing that I would say is worship, I've learned in my life, is 100% a weapon.
Wow. What? That's cool.
that.
Yeah, so what I mean is we live in a life that we're going to endure hard times.
Right.
We are not, I think sometimes I remember thinking man, I'm a Christian now, so everything's supposed to be good, right? No, sometimes things get worse.
Yeah. It's tough, bro.
Yeah, and so we like to preach that your life's gonna be good and your life's gonna be, and I think goodness is not predicated on easy. Sometimes sometimes good is hard. There's good in the tough. And ultimately, I think what worship does, it shifts perspective. It's who are you putting your eyes on? You're going to put your eyes on the thing that's in front of you, or you're going to put your eyes on the God that's going to bring you through. And so if I can teach people how to do that in a corporate setting, my hope is that they can take that toolkit, because I'm not going to be, when your friend is going through a sickness all of a sudden, I'm not going to show up my guitar and be hey, you ready to shift your focus on the Lord?
Right.
Yeah.
It is we were created to worship. And so my hope is that people would have that toolkit inside, that when I face hard things, I'm able to lift my focus. So that can be in music, that can be in dance, that can be in food, that can be in taking a walk in nature. Worship could be anything, but how do we understand what our practice of worship is and shift that? And my hope as a worship pastor of a church is that my community that I serve would know how to do that really, really well.
Yeah.
And they're growing in that. Yeah.
What prompted you to step into this space? I mean, well, for one, you said you didn't think you belonged here, right? In on stage, or just even putting yourself out there. So what was the thing that well, I guess two-part question. What was the thing that prompted you to step into a space that you felt like you didn't belong, AKA music? And then two, taking that and how did you feel like you had some sort of a pastoral calling, or what does that even mean to be a worship pastor? You know what I mean? Like that term. I think worship leader, I get it. Like you're on stage and you lead worship, people sing and you're the one who leads.
Yeah.
But what does that mean to be a worship pastor? So yeah, the two-part question, what made you step into it thinking that you didn't belong? And then how did you feel like you had a pastoral calling with that?
That's a good question. Like, I grew up in an era where like you could actually dream of being a worship leader, which I think there's like interesting things about that too. Like there's good parts about that, I think, but there's also maybe some like bad parts about that. Like I think we live in an era today where like you can become a celebrity in Christianity and like that could be a dream.
Oh man,
A Christian celebrity.
Yeah, man.
that's super weird. But yes,
Yeah,
know, but like-
I get it. Yeah.
And so I'm gonna be honest, some of my want in that was not pure.
Whoa.
I think I was looking for stages to fulfill my worth. And like God's grace is you get on those stages and you realize it doesn't do anything for your worth, you know? But coupled with that though was like, I think just a pure love of the Lord. And like music for me is one of the things that like sometimes when I doubt the existence of God, if I just think about music, it brings me back. It's like, how does this thing exist? This like unbelievably beautiful, like kind of beyond human, supernatural, like means of communication that like, it doesn't matter if it's like quote unquote Christian, like I can go to a concert and like listen to a real song and it can like just do surgery on my soul. Like this thing exists and it like points to something bigger than just humanity. And so for me, ever since I was a kid, like music housed me in the idea that God existed.
Wow.
And I had a talent for it, like as a kid. And it was like the one talent that like I could do in school and not get made fun of, and I can do at home and my parents would kind of like give me some ups, you know, like, and so I like lived in that space for a while. And so for me, I just had opportunity, you know, right out of university, I got invited to be a part of a staff of a church, and I felt like really believed in music. And so like we were writing our own records as like 18, 19-year-olds, producing our own records, like tons of kids were coming to the services. And that actually opened up doors to like become a songwriter actually outside of the church. And I was doing that. So I was like, you know, doing ministry during the day and moonlighting as like a songwriter at like sessions in LA at night.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so for me, I felt like it was kind of this mix between like talent, right? Because you need to have a certain like gifts set to be able to like do this particular role, the logistics of it, being on a platform, doing music, being able to lead a band, recruit folks. And then it just coupled with my love for God. And it felt like those two things collided. And there was like this invitation to try like entering into the space of like what I would say vocational ministry. So like working in ministry as your job, you know? So that's kind of how I got into it.
That's dope. That's dope. When you talk about sort of the being a part of ministry, like your music is a part of a ministry, and then there is the vocational side, like you being singer-songwriter. Did you or do you struggle with balancing both, or sort of like do those things kind of work in tandem with each other, or do you sort of separate that? Because the reason I ask is because I think a lot of believers who are in the creative spaces, right? Like, I say this because I used to do this / probably still struggle with this in the way that I think about it, is separating, like I work in this and then this is my ministry.
Totally.
And it's not, I have a hard time combining that. And so what is that like for you in terms of like, you know, you sort of, how do you view those two pods of like your professional and then like the ministry side?
Yeah. Man, that's a Really good question. Like I think one of the things that has become like recently, like I think what I would call like a holy discontent, like this thing that like makes you a little bit irritated, but that's like God kind of saying that you should be irritated about this, is like, we were invited as followers of Christ to be in the world and not of it, right? So like living amongst it, being in it, being understanding it, calling out the beauty of it, trying to bring healing to the brokenness of it. Like we're supposed to be in it and not of it. I think a lot of what's happened, for whatever reason, lots of different variables, we've separated ourselves from it and become a lot like it. So we've stepped out of the world, created our own little Christian bubbles, and like have our own celebrities, like our own look. Like you can go on social media and people are making fun of worship guys all the time because we all dress the same. You know what I'm saying? I can say like people make fun of, like you can make fun of us now. Like we've literally separated ourselves. I don't think intentionally, but we've done that and like created our own world. And I think in that happening, we've also separated like where God moves and how God moves. And like, man, as creatives and artists, whether it's like food or dance or music or whatever, I think like when we're creating in complete freedom, that is like the most free worship that we can offer to the Lord and to other people around us and to ourselves. And so like when we're like in the middle of like honesty and we're in the middle of like the invitation that God's given us to express who we are fully, like that's worship. And I think in creativity, it's like freedom. And freedom's not like self-indulgence. I think sometimes we get like, freedom is like, it's good to do whatever I want. Like, no, that would be actually like idolatry of self. Like you're actually enslaved to yourself if you just do whatever you want. Freedom is understanding like, I have the power to do whatever I want, but I submit it to something that I feel like I'm invited to, a higher power, right? And so to me, I totally struggle with that because I grew up in a time where it's like you would go into a Christian bookstore and it'd be like, do you like NSYNC? Then you should buy this band, you know? You like audio, like you like this rock band, then you should like this band. Like, and I feel like though there's like a generation rising up and then there's a generation like that I'm a part of that's healing, that's realizing, no, like God's invitation for us is to live integrated, right? Like he hates hypocrisy. He hates the idea of like, I'm this person over here and that person over there. He's like, no. Like that destroys you.
Whoa.
I didn't ever create you to live that way. I created you to live fully who you are in every space that I invite you to. And sometimes the world, you know, if you even want to call it the world, I think it's God speaking through the world. Like we even say that, it's like, that's the world speaking. Like, are you sure that's not God? Speaking in that space? Because God is moving everywhere. God loves everybody. We're all his kids. You know what I'm saying? Like he created each and every one of us. And so to me, I feel like it's a challenge, but I feel like there's this new invitation. So like the music that I'm writing now that I got to like put out a couple years ago now in the last couple years, I feel like it's like my most honest worship. You know, it's my most honest like offering to the Lord and like to my brothers and sisters, to the world, to myself, because it's just honest. And it's real and it's good and it's beautiful, you know? And like I think about God created and then he said, man, this is good. And I think one of the most cool things as like people and the thing that connects us to God the most is when we create, because it makes us like our Father, right? We hold that image of creator and then we go, oh, that's good. And dude, that's worship.
I love that. Literally the first thing that God told us about him was that he's a creator. That was the first thing he said. In the beginning, God created. And if we are made in his image, which we are, that means we are also creators, and he delights in us creating. What are your thoughts towards, you know, so as a, you know, sort of a worship leader and somebody who loves God, creates music, do you feel that the only type of music that you should be creating is Christian music, and I'm using my air quotes.
Yeah.
Like, do you have to mention God and Jesus and all of that in every song? Or do you feel like you can create freely, as you're talking about? Like, let's say you want to talk about love. Let's say you want to talk about, like, I don't know, nature, whatever it is that you want to talk about, something that you just feel like, yo, I just feel led to talk about this. And I don't know if I'm going to even mention God in there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? Like, having to create through, like, I got to be only in this lane and I can only address these topics. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, 100%. I think, like, again, like, I think of the story of, like, Adam and Eve, like the creation story. And, like, remember, like, they eat from the tree that they're not supposed to eat.
Yeah.
And they, like, try to hide themselves because they realized for the first time that they were naked. And I love God's response. And he was like, oh, we're naked. And God's like, who told you that? And that question, I think, is so important for us as creatives, especially those of us maybe who have been, like, programmed in church or grew up in church. It's like, man, that's not holy. Like, wait, who told you that?
Whoa. Yeah.
And I kind of believe, like, instead of, like, this idea of, like, something secular and and sacred, I think it's like that. I don't know if that Likert scale is a good one to live on. I think actually, because God's everywhere. I think the better scale to think about as a Christian for me has been, like, is it holy or profane? And so, like, if I'm creating stuff that is aligned with what God has invited me to create, like points of connection, speaking about what God has created and done, like love, man, God is love. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, all of the things that we would like to say is not good. Like, think about what God's created. And I want to write about that and create about that and create around that stuff. Like, I think that's holy work. Now, if I'm starting to create stuff that is, like, breaking down love or breaking down grace or breaking down those, then I think that that's not doing the thing that God's invited us to, which would be profanity, right? So profanity is not just, like, cuss words or whatever. I think profanity more doesn't speak to that. It speaks to, is it doing the thing that God had intended it for it to do? And art is meant, I think, really clearly to do a couple of things. Connect us with one another, connect us to ourselves, and connect us to the Lord. And it brings comfort. Sometimes how does it happen? Sometimes it's through comfort. Sometimes it's through agitation, right? Most artists in, like, the Bible were prophets that would just call out the status quo. And I think art has a beautiful way of doing that. And so to me, I feel like as I grow older, my hope is that we have more Christians creating art that don't always have, you know, like Christian constructed ideas about it, like, right? That they can be free. I think that's the best witness that we have, actually, is, like, being really good at what we do and being free in our art and saying, man, how are you so connected to yourself that you're bold enough to create that?
Right. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode so far. Just to keep it real, it takes time, energy, and resources to produce this pod. If you feel led to, you can support us by donating on Cash App at Good Service Podcast.
Any amount, large or small, is truly appreciated. Thank you guys so much. We love y'all. Back to the episode. I want to jump in here because one, I want you to eat your sandwich. I feel terrible. We've been bombarding him with questions, so I'm like, oh man, that's one. Two is this is such an important topic. I love this love this conversation because literally one of the things that was stopping me and Ben from, hey man, do we want to talk publicly about our faith in like this podcast and put it all over our social media? Maybe we don't. Maybe because people will think like, oh, look at them all like raw, just talking about their lives. Like, are they even Christian? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah,
look
yeah,
at them
yeah.
struggling through this stuff. Like, are they holy enough to be this type of, but we never even said this is a Christian podcast. This is just my life.
Yeah. Right, right,
You know?
right.
And this is Ben's
Exactly.
life.
Exactly.
You know? We just love God.
Yeah.
And we just talk about this,
good.
and the world will do what it does and its definitions and whatever they want it to do to us.
Yeah.
And I know they'll be like, oh, that's a Christian podcast, that's a whatever. But honestly speaking, we're just guys that love God, that are living life and bringing other people on the show that love God and
Yeah.
living life.
Yeah.
It's simple, right?
Yeah.
And that revelation to me, and this is where I love, we always say Christianese or we grew up Christian, right? But I don't want to say that in a bashing way. I want to say that in a loving way, because I'm glad that I have some of those foundations to even
Sure.
be, here. Because I love generational blessing. I love that my mom woke up 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
Still, shout out mom, that she's still waking up in the
Yeah,
morning,
yeah, yeah.
praying for me.
새벽 기도.
Yes,
Yeah.
새벽 기도. Please save my son.
Yeah, yeah.
And that I have this relationship with God. I
Totally.
literally give that to my mom. Big ups to her, and I will love that forever.
Yep.
However, as I'm in my journey, my personal journey, I'm going through that thing of like, wait a minute. I used to be like secular Christian. I'm like, that's how I would say things like, oh, I'm going to do secular work. This is my Christian work.
Yeah.
And it was always separate my whole freaking life.
Yeah.
But that division in your soul is causing chaos.
Totally.
Because that's not what it's supposed to. Because every time you fail in one and succeed in the other, you think, I'm not Christian and I don't love God no more.
Yeah. Right.
Which is insane. That's nothing has. Your relationship hasn't changed. You might be not. Yes, you might not be obedient as much in the certain things. Sure, whatever. Or maybe you're super like this is a good season for you, right? But that doesn't mean you left your talents. You don't throw everything out the window.
Yeah.
And I'm learning so much of that this year. And I love how you said you're like gauging everything between, whether something is holy or whether something is, what was the second
Profane.
thing? Profane.
Yeah.
I love that word too. I'm gonna steal it. But what's funny is I carry this note. That's why I opened my phone.
Yeah.
There's this note that I carry with me. It literally says measuring stick on the top. And what that is just Galatians 5, 16,
Yeah.
17, 19, 24. It's literally, this is me always focusing on what the definitions of flesh is. So is this in the flesh? And what the definition of what spirit is. Is this love, joy, peace, and kindness? Like,
Yeah.
I'm always doing this thing because no matter where I'm creating, if I'm in the spirit, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
All good.
Totally.
And in those moments, if I'm in the flesh, gotta work on that one. I gotta pause. Okay.
Yeah.
Like reset and get back to the spirit. And I think why this is so important is there's never been a time where there's so many creators, tools of creating.
Yeah, that's a
Sure,
great
back in the
point.
day we had like pencils and paper. Sure, yeah, we could sing in the shower. I'm sure. These are avenues of creation for sure. But this is the first time where we have this thing that's attached to our pockets all the time that could film, that can edit on the fly. AI allows us to dream and draw things that we never drew before.
Totally.
So creation is now like, it's like, dude, it's at our fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I could be wrong, this could be blasphemy, whatever. But because there's so many people aligned with this creator mindset, there's more people waking up to God.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are so curious out of nowhere. They're like,
Yeah.
yo, Kev, like, what are you always talking about?
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, yo, I heard your podcast, bro. Like, I was like, oh, thanks. He's like, man, I didn't know. I'm like, shoot, I didn't know you cared,
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about that. They're like, no, I don't know if I want to. But then they'll be curious.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, I used to not be bold in my faith because I was scared because there's so much opposition. This is the first time in my life where I'm being so bold. And everyone's like, I'm interested.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about the Bible study and things like that we're a part of.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, even in that, there's this thing where people go, hey, I'll tell them, oh, I have this Bible study on Monday nights. They go, oh yeah, what church is it a part of? Right? That's the first question I usually get. But when I go, nah, it's not part of any church. It's just a bunch of us that love God that read the Bible together. They're like, oh, I'm in. Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Which is also interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been going on.
You know,
all
like
over the place.
as you're talking, Kev, like I'm thinking like going off of like, is it holy or is it profane, right? And the concept of art, art is not always butterflies and rainbows. Sometimes art is painful.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best art is painful because it's real. People identify with pain. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, that's just the truth. Like, yeah, we all want to feel good, but we also feel bad. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, as you're even talking about music, because I would imagine, like, and this is just even in my head that I'm like, I should really pray to deconstruct this. Of like, if I think of, oh, he's a Christian artist, I'm thinking he's just worshiping God, period. God is good, God is love, God is great.
Yeah.
Like, can a Christian artist sing about depression? Can a Christian artist sing about being angry? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, not to say that like do it for the sake of shock value, but if that's what's real, because I think what good art is honesty. Because if it's fake, you can sniff that out. It's like, you don't even believe that, bro. Like, you don't even talk that way. You don't even like dress that way, whatever it is, right? But if you know that this is like, yes, I identify with that. And that's what art, like that's the power of art. It actually tugs at the heart. It's like, yo, I get that. And wow, what a beautiful way to express that, or what a interesting way to express. I would have never thought to dance to that or sing about that or paint this or whatever it is, right? And so I think that's also something that man, like we gotta work on, I think, as believers, you know, it's like, man, God's not in a box, so why do we put our art in a box? Why do we put what we create, like what's off limits? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
no, 100%.
It's like, dude, just be honest. And I think if in your honesty, because bro, like when I like read the Bible, I'm like I'm reading, like, see how David prays. He's like, I'm like, bro, are you yelling at God right now? I'm like, are you allowed to yell at God?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you allowed to like, Lord, where are you? Are you hiding from me? Like, are you allowed to talk like that? It's like, well, he clearly did. Yeah. And I think that's also something that, man, God wants to know the honesty of your heart, and he wants to see you create from an honest place too, because I think he does use the honesty of our creation, even when it's coming from a place of pain. Yeah. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
I think if you even think about the Bible, which is like one of the greatest gifts that we have as followers of Christ, in it talks about sin, depression, sex, love. It talks about all the things. And it does it in artistic ways. It does it in biographical ways. It does it in all these different ways. This is God's word for us. So if it's in that, of course we could create about and around that and speak to it and express things about that. So to me, I feel like even the idea of like creating stuff for fun, like we should know how to party. Right. We should, like, God talks about like feasts and good times. And like, so even like the whole spectrum of like, yes, like depression and anger and hurt and like joy and goodness and all the things, this is all like the invitation of God to experience the fullness of who he is. Yeah. You know, and so my hope is that like more and more folks like delve into the person that God's created them to be and fully express that. I think one of the things that my hope would be is, I think some of the reasons why we back away from it is because we're afraid of the rejection that might happen if we go there. Right. And I think we need more Christian brothers and sisters for our response to be embrace and not to push away. Yeah. Like there is so much like, and again, I love my Christian sisters and brothers, but like there's so much hate that comes from us. It's like you do one thing that doesn't feel Christian to you, and all of a sudden you're blasting somebody. Right. And I think there's probably good intention around it. You want to keep people in check. You want to keep them accountable. But like, I wonder if the strategy needs to be more embrace than it is to push away. That's good. We got to hold each other. So maybe it feels it's something new to you. Sit with it for a little bit. Yeah. Be curious versus like, I'm coming at you with this. And I think if we offer more spaces, I think one of the things that probably when I'm hearing about this Bible study, which I need to come out to and check out,
bro, you need to come through.
Like, it feels like there's like a spirit of embrace.
Yeah.
So like, whereas maybe what people have felt in churches in the past, and again, this is not just about bashing the church, but just honestly, they don't feel embraced there.
Right.
So like, I don't think I'm going to show up to that, but this I'll show up to because there's embrace. And so, man, if we want to see more free arts, if we want to see people like rise up in the spaces that we really believe God should be like continuing to move in, we've got to embrace people.
Right. Right.
And we got to stop pushing them away saying, oh, you do that, that's not that important. You're not speaking a sermon on a stage. Oh, that's not that important. You're not like leading worship, that's not important. Like, no. What you're doing is just as important. If you're a teacher, that's just as much of a holy calling. If you're an artist, that's just as much of a holy calling. If you're a stay-at-home parent, you're just as important in the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
We got to stop this uplifting certain stations in life and just understand we're all invited to like this beautiful work, you know? Yeah.
You know, as you're talking about this embrace, right? If the church is a place, we've all heard the analogy, or maybe not, like the church is like a hospital, right? It's for the sick. Like a hospital is not going to be like, oh, you're too sick to be here. Like get better before you come here. You're too hurt to come into this hospital. Like that doesn't make any sense. I'm here because I am so hurt and I need help. You know what I'm saying? So like if the church is also supposed to sort of in a way mirror that, like the hospital analogy, man, like it's supposed to be for those who need it. Everybody needs it, but it's for the broken. It's for the hurt. And I think that's the thing. And like, man, of course, like, like be in the world and not of it, right? Meaning what? What does that mean? It's like, like we're all sinners. We have a sin nature. That doesn't mean cool, just keep doing that. Because even when Jesus met people, he met them where they were. He met them in their sin, but then he also said, follow me and sin no more. Like there's supposed to be a transformation. And now that transformation is also a process, right? Yeah. It's not like, oh, cool, I follow Jesus, no more sin in my life. I don't struggle with anything anymore. That's just not true. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, we are going to struggle with sin for the entirety of our lives. You know what I'm saying? Sure. And I think there's deliverance for sure. And there's, we can all probably attest to miraculous things that we've been delivered from. Like, AK, I used to struggle with this and now I don't. Like, praise God. I don't know how that happened, but God delivered me from that. And there are things that may unfortunately just be a lifetime struggle. You know what, man, I might just struggle with this forever until I'm with God. And praise God that his grace covers that. So I think I'm trying to, as you're talking about embrace, and you said something, like you said hope, especially when you talk about creation or art, creating art. It's one thing, I think that that's the thing when I see, let's just talk about music because we're talking about that. When I hear a song that is like talking about, let's just say it's just angry or it's just sad, and then it's done. Yeah. It's like, dang, that sucks. Yeah. But then even when like people throughout scripture would pray and they would just like cry out to God and just be in so much despair, yet there's like, but yet I still believe. Yet I still know you're there. So it's that hope piece that I think where, when God is in your life and he's alive, when we are in our dumps, like because the Holy Spirit lives within us, he doesn't let us stay in the dumps. And because I personally have been in a season where I feel like I've been like, just God, I feel like you're silent with me. Like I ask questions and I don't really hear answers. And I'm like, God, are you there? And I ask him that, you know what I mean? Like, hello? You know what I mean? Like, are you there? Yeah. But then I also, even in those moments of silence, I feel like God is saying like, hey, I'm with you in the silence. Just because I'm not telling you the answer that you want right now, I'm here. And I feel that. So like, I'm like, all right, God, like, and when I feel that, like, and it, like, dude, it's just like been bringing me to tears these days. Cause I'm like, God, I feel like you're silent, but yet I know you're here. You know what I mean? So I think that's like also the difference, right? Like, you can feel all the things that everyone feels, but when Jesus is alive, the Holy Spirit is in you, like, you know that there's a hope at the tail end of whatever that emotion, whatever that season is.
Yeah.
The hope is there.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Yeah, one of the things that I kept thinking about when we were talking about Embrace too, like thinking about how, again, speaking truth in the church today, not bashing on the church, because I don't want to do that. I definitely hear a lot of that kind of content sometimes, and that even turns me off. I'm just like, we got things to work on as a community, just like any other community. It's all good.
Sure do.
And, I attend the church today. I'm not a big fan of mega churches in general. So like, I just, it's hard. It's hard to like connect. It's hard to like where I'm from is mostly small churches, and I have a good mentor of mine that's a missionary.
Yeah.
And it's really dope what they do. Anytime when he lives here now, but anytime, and he used to be in the Philippines, shout out Davao. But anyways, in the Philippines, in Davao, anytime you made a 20-member church, the members would go, yeah, we're starting to get big. And they church plant.
Interesting.
And I'm like, excuse me? Because it's all about accessibility and community. So now this is too many people are coming here. So we're gonna church plant a little bit closer to your bus stop. And then another one at your house. And it just keeps growing this way. And it's beautiful. It's like, there are good numbers like 10. They like to keep it at 10. And I'm like, what? This is wild, dude. And I'm like, okay. And it gets me really excited at hearing stuff like that. And then I start thinking about just missionaries in general. They embody that word, embrace. Because you can't go in there, literally the word colonizing, right? You can't go in there and be like, I'm here. Yeah. I'm gonna take your culture on and I'm gonna teach you Jesus. Like,
right.
Well, let's not do that. Like, that's like really negative and crazy, and like it's just so aggressive, and it's so off-putting, and it's just terrible. And so when I think about, when you were saying that, I started thinking about all the missionaries that we know, what they did, how we have a good friend, I think maybe you know them too, Benny and Janice, how they created a safe house, right? Yeah, safe house in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And then they're like hanging out with all the operators and pimps and whatever, doing block parties. Yeah. Not because they're condoning their behavior, but they're embracing them as humans too. And the impact that they're making in the last 16 years that they've been there. Things like that. It's just like we need to pay attention.
Yes.
Like, we need to pay attention. And I know the structures that was put in place in the 80s and 70s or whenever that was that this started happening. I know that there was a reason and purpose for all of that, and I give props to all of that. So we're here today because of it. But at the same time, there's a lot of us not in these churches, not in these circles, because there's so much pain from the lack of embrace. And I just hope that for those creators or whoever, anybody that's listening out there, let's go a little more grit. Let's be more like Jesus. Let's be more accepting. Let's do more embrace.
Yes.
It's just like, like I just kept, like as you were talking, I just kept thinking about how real communal missional work looks like.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like. And it's just like, man.
I think I think what you guys are doing, for instance, on the Monday Night Bibles is so important. And it's maybe it has nothing to do with what exists already, but it has to do with the fact that like we need more spaces, new spaces to be created for people to feel like they belong. You can't fake belonging, right? Like if I have to change who I am to fit into a space, then I don't belong.
Right.
That becomes like some sort of situation where like I've got to, be a certain way to like fit in. Fitting in is not belonging. Belonging is being able to show up as you are. And so less about like what exists already, but more about like I feel like an invitation right now to create new spaces. Like we got to spend our energy creating new spaces because people don't belong in spaces that exist anymore. And they're looking for belonging. And I think there's an invitation by God to say, okay, let's create new spaces. Because people who are going to the spaces that exist, they feel like they belong there. Cool.
Yeah.
what about the people that don't feel like they belong?
Yeah.
What are we going to do for them?
Right.
And to me, I feel like that's what's so exciting about what you're doing, because just in an obedience, without like this like crazy, like, you know, we're going to go do this and build this and this is going to exist because it's going to exist against that. And they're just like, no, we're just going to create a space and we're going to see who belongs. Like, man, we need that so badly. And so I'm hoping even in my life to spend less time so worried about like, you know, breaking down other things. We need people who do that. We need people who break down and correct and bring healing to. Yeah. But I want to spend my life as a creative to spend all my energy creating the new thing. Right? Like, I'm so busy with the stuff that's in front of me now, I can't even worry about what's behind me. Yeah. Like, I want to just be a part of it. And I think there's just like, it'll look different. It'll smell different. Yeah. It'll be different. And that's kind of what I'm excited about in this new time. And so even what you guys are doing, yes, it's honoring. I mean, as Asian Americans, we're going to always honor what came before us. That's, but that is a God-given thing. Yeah. Of course we honor the thing that comes before. And part of the vulnerability of that is sometimes we don't individuate enough to create the new thing. And I think that what we're seeing happen, I think in the Asian American community, is we're starting to see young leaders individuate and saying, yes, I honor like everything I learned from the generation that came before me. And there is a special invitation on my life that I'm going to follow, even if it breaks away from some of the tradition that I came from. And I think that's what is going to be like the new spaces that we're a part of and building, and we need them. We need thousands of them. Like, there are too many people out there that feel like they don't belong to spaces, and we just need to create more spaces of belonging, you know?
That's dope.
Speaking of new, I did want to ask, like, currently today as James, so we learned a little bit about the past and, you know, where some of those awesome and interesting moments were. And speaking of new, I'd love to know where you are like today. Like, what excites you right now? Yeah. What's making you go, oh man, I want to talk about this, or I could, or whatever you can talk about. Yeah. And this is kind of like what I'm building, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I think so. The first thing I would say is just my own artistry. So just under my name as James Paek. So when I left this last season, you know, I really wanted to do stuff to like heal and take a break. I had never taken a break in my entire life. I had just been working. So much so I didn't even know how to take a break. So I like called some of my friends and I was like, how do you take a break, dude? Like, can you like, I don't want to, because even in my like working hard, I was like, I don't want to waste my break. Like, how do you take a break? And there's a guy called Eugene Peterson who wrote the Message version of the Bible, if you've ever heard of it. It's like a very colloquial version of the Bible that does its best to stick true to like the veracity of the word, which I think is really beautiful. But he said, when you take a break, it's two things. It's play and pray. So do things that are designed to help you pray, which is connect with God and connect you with yourself, and do things that recreate the things you've lost in work. So recreation. Right? Just do, and for me, playing is making stuff that like I love with people that I love. And so I created this EP. There's a lot of pain in it if you listen to it. And it somehow got a distribution deal, and it's done super well. It's got a lot of love editorially, particularly on Spotify. I think I was told I was the first like Korean American to ever get the cover of New Music Friday Christian, which is super cool. And so there's just been this beautiful response to the music. And so I'm continuing to make and build with these guys. And
this is a perfect segue. You want to drop a little bit?
And here's a little sample.
A little acapella sample, you know?
I don't usually like doing it, but I've been listening to The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, that record. It's one of my favorite albums. So it's in my mind. But
just a little bit. Just a tiny bit. This is my favorite part.
Oh, this crazy circumstance. I knew his life deserved a chance, but everybody told me to be smart. Look at your career, they said. Lauren, baby, use your head. But instead I chose to use my heart. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little, I got a little allergies, but
bro. Oh no, that was
fire,
little pitchy
bro.
for the
let's take that self-critique out. Let's take that.
Yeah, get that out of
Get
here,
that
bro.
imposter
Get that
syndrome
out
out
of
of
here.
here. What is he talking about?
No, man.
That
Thank
was
you, bro.
beautiful.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
That was
Thank you.
tight.
Beautiful.
That was
Oh,
super
my
tight.
goodness. Definitely gift.
Yeah.
God, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's wonderful.
And then the new thing, man, I actually just got funding miraculously. One of the things that I started realizing when being in like the Christian music scene is most of the songs that we're singing in church are not written by Asian Americans. I would say like none of them, actually. Very few. And man, I just feel like in this last season of life, like God's been really showing me the dignity that he's put in my heritage as an Asian American.
Wow.
Like, yes, there's brokenness too that we need to name and invite God to heal, but there is like such goodness. And like when I was growing up, it was a liability. Like I was told, you're not going to get a record deal because you're an Asian American guy.
It's terrible.
But in this season of life, I don't know if like,
So bad.
yeah, and like things like honor, like so reflective of God, things of like, hey, most of us with our parents in a bicultural situation, if you're second generation, like God as father becomes so important and God as home becomes so important. Like Dave Gibbons actually, who I think will be on the podcast at some point, like really taught about third culture. Like we don't know where home is as kids sometimes growing up, but like, so God being home is so important. And so there's so much like dignity in like our story, like our lived experience actually informs the way that we see God. And so we see that in our Black brothers and sisters, like there's Black liberation theology, the way that they preach and worship, it all comes from this lived experience of like pain and knowing that God is going to bring them through. And similarly, I feel like we actually have a theology by our lived experience that is continuously being formed. And so I started having this dream of like, what would it look like to gather Asian American writers, hopefully that aren't just in the church space, but like that would reflect upon their lived experience and then write for the church. And so miraculously got some funding. And so working with a small group of folks, really cool group of folks to gather Asian American songwriters and artists from all different walks of life. And again, you don't have to be going to church. You don't have to be a certain way. Like if you know God, come. And let's be honest. Let's just be honest. And so really excited about the possibility of that. Like,
Wow.
I know it's going to be hard. It has been hard. But like we'll probably have our first like writing camp before the end of the year.
That's amazing.
Which is super exciting. And then, I think I write a lot for a group of folks called Common Hymnal. So Common Hymnal is a space that the idea of it is it's a book of songs for what they call the spiritual underground. So if you feel like you don't belong in mainstream Christianity, we want to write songs that feel like home to you. Wow. And so big part of that, been writing for that. A lot of really cool stuff is happening with that. Got to go on tour with them, like a Get Out the Vote tour. So a lot of justice driven music that's like driven by our faith. And so that's been really cool too. And so, but in the midst of all that, just to keep it 100, it's also been a really hard season. You know, it's my whole vocational life has been as a pastor in the church. And what I saw and what I went through in this last church that I was a part of is really invited me to a space of pause and reflection of like how I feel like I want to live my life moving forward. And so in the midst of that, there's been cool stuff like the TV show and my own music and whatever. But I don't know if you're out there and you're going through like a season of like in between, like you're not alone. Like I'm in the in-between, even in the midst of all the beautiful stuff that's happening. It's a hard time right now, I feel like, for so many of us. I think the pandemic, what it revealed, this new era of creativity and this new era of access to information, I think we're all kind of fumbling a little bit, trying to figure out. And so I just think, again, like my prayer for myself and for people who are listening, like, God, help us find belonging.
Wow.
Help us find embrace in the season where it feels like we're just flailing. Build more spaces like the spaces that you guys have built. Like, do more of it. We need thousands of it. And so in the midst of the excitement and the cool stuff, just know too, just to be completely honest, it's been hard.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been hard.
You know what's crazy is like, I'm hearing all the stuff that you just shared of what you're doing, and I'm like, wow, this guy's life seems pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you capped it with, and it's a hard season. I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because like, and the reason why I point that out is that from the outside looking in, you could look at someone's life and see what they're doing and then think, oh, their life must be great.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then, I mean, only you know how you're doing. I don't know how you're doing.
Totally.
I'm not you. I'm not in you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, only you know how you're doing. And I, social media is like such a, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's a tool,
yeah.
and it's
Totally.
it could hurt you. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah, like when you look at everybody, like, man, everyone's killing it right now, or everyone looks so happy.
Yeah.
Why am I not?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Dude, bro, yeah.
so
Last night for me. What the heck?
yeah. Because I completely identify with you. I feel like I am such an in-between season too.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's at least one person out there that's also in that space.
Can I say something to encourage both of you guys and myself? Actually, what's funny is so many things James said today. I'm like, I'm living through this. Like I am literally doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I love the way you did that, where you talked about everything you're doing, but you still pause to say where you're really at. And thank you for that. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable. Thank you for sharing that with us, because there's a saying we say every Monday night is that your opinions could kill somebody, but your experience could save somebody's life.
Yeah.
And that's a saying that we say a lot. I learned that from one of my mentors, and I really appreciate that, because as I'm listening to that and I'm going, man, we're living in that moment. And what's funny is like, both of us in our own ways, we're doing a lot, but we feel in between. And it's because you're right, the pandemic just happened. There's a lot of transition for a lot of people. And when you're transitioning, what the world tells you to do, for me, and this is where I want to encourage, is that the world goes, find identity in your occupation. Find identity as a man.
Yes.
On your skills,
Yep.
what you do for work, what you do for family. That is your identity.
Yeah.
But what God is teaching us right now, guys, just find identity in him.
Yeah. That's it. That's it.
And home is always home
Yeah.
with God.
Yeah.
And I felt that. He spoke to me right away. The moment you said that, I was like, let me encourage all of us here. What we're unlearning right in this season is take it all. My identity is with God.
Yeah, that's good. And as I've been also, even in just all throughout Scripture, there's God uses the underqualified person all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's who He loves to use.
Yo.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite.
And you can't. There's like these sayings, right? Like on the other side of tension is breakthrough, right? Like the analogy of even like the rubber band. You can't launch the rubber band until you pull it all the way back, where it's like stretched,
Yes.
where it looks like it's gonna break, and then it launches, right? And that's not to be this like motivational talk of like, oh, if you're in tension, that means breakthroughs on the other side of it. Maybe it is, but I think the point of it is that like, as I was talking about even the silence, where you ask the questions and you're not getting the answers. What I have to remind myself of is like, you may not be getting the answer when you want it, but God's always gonna answer. You know what I mean? And I know that God knows better than I do of when that answer should be given to me.
Yeah.
Like, I think I want it now because I'm just impatient. I'm like, Lord, I asked right now. I want the answer now. But God's like, no, I'm not ready to tell you yet. And that's good for you.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to let you sit and process a little bit more. And I'm going to let you get a little bit more desperate for me.
Yeah.
I want you to come to me a little bit more desperately, because that's your best place, is when you are in need. Because if you just get everything when you ask for it, why would you need God?
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good, man. Like, just knowing that, I love that that home is with God. It's like it's at his feet. That's our home, you know, and he's always good, even in the silence. Yeah.
I remember I was leading worship one time in this community that like was about to just go through travesty. And there are like moments in my life, not all the time, and sometimes it's like a bad taco that I ate last night, but there's like sometimes where I feel like I get like an impression from God. And I just remember like the words that came out of my mouth were like, Jesus doesn't just have the answer, he is the answer. Mm-hmm. And man, to live that is really tough. Because I think to what you were saying, like we because we're in the world, we're breathing in consistently, like you're worth your influence, you're worth who you know, you're worth what you do for work. You're like, because we're consistently being treated that way. Yeah. Yeah. If I show up to an event, like, what do you do for work? Like, what are you doing with your life? All that kind of stuff. And so we're consistently like barraged, right? We're breathing this thing in. So it's not like you learn it one day and it goes away, because we're consistently breathing. Like we consistently need to detoxify, right? Like that toxin that gets into us, like, oh yeah, like I'm starting to believe again that like fruit is not, you know, love, joy, peace, patience, but fruit is if I have like more social media numbers. Oh, like that's poison. Yeah. So like, how do I get that out? And like, how do you get that out? To your point, it was like, it's time with the Spirit of God, but it's also in communities like your guys' Monday night thing. Because we need reminders from our brothers and sisters like, hey bro, hey, you're forgetting like what we all know. Mm-hmm. Let me bring, like, let's get that out of you, you know? And so to me, that like, we have to consistently detoxify from the idea that our worth is like placed on the things. I gotta do it every day. Sometimes I feel like I'm on top of the world. The next hour I can be in the dumps. Like that's how quickly it can turn. Yeah. So that's to your point of like, when we can own our fragility. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about these days about the communion, and like Jesus asks us to remember him in his death and his suffering in that moment, right? Like he's having dinner with his friends and he breaks bread and says, eat this. This is my broken body. Do this in remembrance of me. He pours wine and says, this is my blood shed for you. Like, do this in remembrance of me. He doesn't remember him. He said, remember me like an all-powerful king and hero. He's like, no, remember me in my suffering. Yeah. And it to me, it reminds me of a humble God that says, I know what it means to go through hard times. So when you're going through hard times, do not run away from me. Let me run with you. Let me sit with you. I'm not just the strong God. I'm not just the all-powerful God. I'm the God that suffered. And the invitation, I think, for us is to remember, like, in our suffering, we have a God who's saying, I'm right there.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy, bro. Man, I feel like we can go forever. But, I know. So this show is called Good Service. We feel that everybody has a purpose in this world. Everybody has the ability to serve in a very specific and unique type of way. Yeah. What do you feel like good service is to you? What is your good service?
I think, man, these days it's being a good friend. Yeah, there's music and there's creativity and there's strategy in my mind and leadership, but like, honestly, man, I think my good service is like, how do I sit with my friends? And how do I be somebody that loves them really, really, really well? Like through the hard and through the good times. A good friend, man, is a gift. And so it's a gift I need and it's a gift I want to be. And so I think for me, that's the invitation of being a good service is let me be a good friend.
That's great.
That's dope.
I love that.
Well, speaking of service, man, how can we serve you? Like what's something that our audience, us here personally, what's the way that we could serve you?
I appreciate it. Legitimate like prayers if you pray, like good energy if that's your thing. Again, like it's the in-between space is not an easy one, you know. A lot of crazy days, but A lot of good ones too. So, but I can use your prayer and good thoughts. Listen to the music that's being put out there. My name's James Paek. Would love for you to listen. And then if you're an Asian American artist that has like a heart to like really see our lived experience dignified, like reach out, like DM me. I'm pretty accessible.
What's your social?
Just at JPAEK on Instagram. And I'm pretty much just there. I don't really do it. So yeah, like DM me. Would love to just grab a coffee. Doesn't necessarily mean we'll work together, but like I think just the gathering of creatives and creatives of faith is important in this season. So
Awesome.
Would love to meet you.
I already have some people in mind that I'm gonna send your way.
Dude, yeah, please. Yeah,
A ton of them.
Yeah, that's dope.
Sweet.
That's dope, man. Thanks for coming on and hanging out.
thanks for having me.
Breaking bread with us.
Yeah,
and
man.
Just chilling, man. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. If you are finding this episode by itself, we have a lot more ahead of it. So make sure you follow us, like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Follow us on our socials at Good Service Pod. And that's it. We appreciate y'all. Oh, we got a Cash App.
Support us on the Cash App.
Yeah, if y'all are digging what we're doing, I mean, look, guys, it takes time and energy to put on a podcast and lots of hours in post. Shout out to our production team, man. Shout out Kevin Kang back there, Korean Money Tree. Follow him. So if you guys feel led to support us, donate to the Cash App. We would really appreciate y'all. And that's it, man. We love y'all. See you on the next one. Good service. We out. Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe, and leave us that 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Good Service Pod, and on YouTube at Good Service Podcast.
And if you'd like to support us, you can donate on Cash App at Good Service Podcast. Thank you. Peace.